Okay, everybody, so it's been a little while since we watched a video, and today we're going to get into starting talking about the background and history of Europe to kind of some more modern stuff. And we're going to go real quick here. We're just going to hit a couple different things to just give you an idea of how Europe has developed over time. And the first period that we talk about is the classical period, which I like to say is the time in which Greece and Rome produced cool stuff. And we'll start with Greece first in our kind of flash here. One of the things that really we get from Greece is the development of literature and theater. The Greeks actually, as you see here, made the first real theater that we've ever seen in the world. And if you follow the mouse here, the people would be down at the bottom, the performers, and then up here everyone would sit. And they built it into the side of these mountains or hills because they understood basic acoustics. The Greeks were very accomplished at that, and so the people down at the bottom had these special masks that kind of had megaphones in it, and they could talk kind of like how I am talking now, but the people all the way up top would be able to hear it. Now, what's really important about this literature and theater is much of the literature that we have today really comes out of Greek basics. Guys like Shakespeare and things like that really were heavily influenced by Greece. The idea of writing both fiction, in other words, the Greek plays, many of you which you have read, or things like history or writing about science, all really come from the Greeks. And one of the reasons why that comes from the Greeks was that the Greeks were really kind of your forebears of some of the earliest philosophy we've ever had. Famous guys like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle really pushed people to kind of just think and to think about how the world acts and think about how the world works. For instance, Socrates taught people basically to doubt and got them to take everything to the next level and to really get people to ask questions. Guys like Plato was famous for his writings on government and opening a school and getting people to think about more complex things like love and hate and things like that. And Aristotle, simply put, was the greatest thinker of ancient times. The most important thing that he gives us today, because a lot of his scientific theories were actually wrong, but was the foundation of formal logic. And logic and the ideas behind logic really is the core of most of our thought and scientific thought today. And so we've got literature and theater, we've got philosophers, and then you've got art and architecture. And probably architecture is the biggest thing with the Greeks here. As you can see here, this is the Parthenon. This is my picture because I got to go here. It was very, very lucky. If you get a chance, go. But you see these columns here, as well as this basic structure of a temple. And they did lots of statues and this idea of making art central to a society was really important. They're also known for their science and mathematics. I'm not going to go into all of the people, but it was really from guys like Pythagoras who gave us the ideas of course, the right triangle, but just geometry in general, to others like Euclid, who basically invented geometry. And actually, the textbook that you guys use in your basic geometry classes was created by Euclid, 2,200 years ago. Ideas of how to study math and do experimentation, the Greeks. A guy by the name of Democritus developed the idea of the atom. Other guys, like Hipparchus, and then other people continuing to press each other, continuing to build upon each other, and the foundation of science. And one of the reasons why science has been such a big deal in European history has been because of the Greeks. Then you also have government. It is the city-state of Athens that brought us democracy. And it's not a democracy like you see today. The idea of a full-blown democracy in which all citizens actively took part in governance and rule. Unfortunately, in Athens, that meant all male property owners, so it wasn't a lot of people, but you got to start somewhere. And then, of course, you have the famed Spartans, which, you know them from. And of course, we have the technical difficulty.
This is Sparta!
There we go. There's our friends at Sparta. And Sparta gave us, if I hop back real quick, Sparta basically gave us, as you see this idea of military rule and rule by force and power. And I'll talk to you about some different things like that in class, but nonetheless pretty impressive. Now, super fun fact, the Greeks also, it looks like, invented the world's first computer. It's called the Antikythera mechanism. We found it in 1901, and it dates back to 1500 BC, and it turns out it's an analog computer that can tell you the position of stars, so you can use it for sea travel. It's also kind of a basic calendar, and it's used to predict eclipses. And if you see pictures over here, hey, that's how we found it. That's when we did the MRI of it, and then we built it. So yes, the Greeks had a computer. So all in all, the Greeks had quite a lot of success. Did they have problems? Of course they did. Women, no rights. Did they have slavery? Absolutely. They invented the term barbarian because they had people that they said their language sounded like people talking in bar, bar, bar. So they called them barbarians. Not very nice. Then we have the Romans. The Romans, man, they are huge for us, and they're huge for us in one big deal, the concept of the Republic. It was the Romans that developed the basis of the government that you see today. They had a Senate that was elected by the citizens. Now, this was typically made up of the upper classes, but that Senate was a legislative body, and they had an executive branch, which was called the consuls. The consuls were picked from the Senate to run the overall government. Now, there was a short civil war in which commoners rose up because they weren't represented. So they were like, hey, no problem, we'll fix that. Commoners would be represented by tribunes, which were voted in by the commoners. And interestingly enough, the tribunes could veto laws that were made by the Senate that might be discriminatory. So yes, the Romans 2,500 years ago actually proved to be the basis of your government today. Now, eventually they would change and become an empire, and the key guy for that is Augustus Caesar. No, not Julius Caesar. Yes, you might have, hey, I know Julius Caesar, maybe you read the play. Yes, Julius Caesar was the first guy to be given the title of imperator or emperor, but unfortunately he ruled for a year and then he was assassinated by all his friends, which is kind of unfortunate, and it's very hard for you to be influential in an empire when you're already dead. It was his grandnephew, Augustus Caesar, that was the guy that actually became the first real emperor and created the Empire of Rome, which, as you can see over here, was very freakishly large. About 30 different modern day countries make it up, one of the largest empires in history. But as we go back here, the biggest thing from them is that they did create law codes, the ideas of innocent until proven guilty, the ideas in that the law should apply equally to all people no matter what their background, the idea that all laws should apply to all people no matter where you are in the empire. So like a geographical thing, like the idea of a national law, the idea that you should be represented by a lawyer in court. So all of these things we get from Rome. And again, the massiveness of the empire. Now, some other things we get from Rome. Hey, let's look at roads. It was the Romans that taught us that roads equal economic prosperity. Roads allow you to have your army move back and forth very, very quickly. And really, what's kind of crazy is that Rome had 48,000 miles of interstate highways. We only have 47,000 miles of interstate highways, and they are 2,000 years older than us. And many of the Roman roads, as you see a picture of right here, were paved over and used for modern day roads today. Something else they did were aqueducts, or the first long distance water supply stations. If you look here, this is an aqueduct. If you follow the mouse up top, you see here, this is where water would be, and they used these arches to support it so it could go over this lake here, and this water would go down basically 0.1 of a degree and it would go for dozens and dozens of miles to feed the fountains of Rome and other major cities, and so they provided water for all their citizens. Probably some other things. They did invent arch. Well, they didn't invent arches, but they made arches. They took it to the highest level. They took the concept of a vaulted ceiling, but it was the Romans that did invent the dome. Um, and they also invented the stadium. As you can see here, this is a picture of the Coliseum. And if you look here, here's the inside of it. It is the actual form of a stadium today, guys. On the bottom would be the floor. These would be all the seats. People would be assigned section and seat numbers. Although it does allow us to understand some of the tragedy of Rome, if you will. If I hop back, actually, a couple, going back to there again, that the tragedy of Rome is that these great stadiums were built, and they were built in all these major cities, but they were built so that they could watch people die. Pretty terrible, and we'll get to it in class. Something else as I pop back is the biggest thing that the Romans invented that we still have today: concrete. It was the Romans that invented concrete. If you look at the building that you're sitting in, listening to this right now, or at home, all of the basis is concrete, the biggest invention they give us today. So, what did Rome give us? They gave us law codes, they gave us the structure of our government, and they gave us concrete. Concrete built that, concrete built that, and then concrete built this. This is the Pantheon. This was a temple built to all the gods of Rome, and a bigger dome would not be built. This was over 150 feet across until the Astrodome was built in the 1970s in the United States of America. And just to give you an idea of how beautiful it is, we'll take a peek on the inside. I know it's going to last a second here, but trust me, it's going to be worth it. Okay, as I jump forward a little bit. So as you see here, you go in as it's so, and you can see all this brilliant natural light. Now, the thing is here, as it kind of buffers, is that this light is actually all from one window that it has in the top, and you see this person's looking in. It's really breathtaking. You see all these wonderful sculptures and these statues. Okay, and we get a nice little pause again, but it's going to be worth it. Trust me, just wait for it. It's going to happen as I fill some time here. Some famous people are buried here. The great artist Raphael is buried here. You can see on the bottom here, as I'll stop moving the mouse around a little bit as it'll load, you've got marble everywhere. You've got marble on the sides, but on the top you have this dome. And as it's going to start to advance here, you'll see with the dome is that it's really, really beautiful. And that oculus at the top, that's the one window. And what's really cool is rain will come straight down and won't get anybody wet on the sides, and it goes to a vent in the floor. It's pretty cool. Now, what do the Romans and New Jersey have in common, you ask? They both built the world's first malls. Yes, the Cherry Hill Mall was actually the first concept of a mall in the United States of America when it was built. And this is the Forum of Trajan, and this is his mall, Trajan's Mall. This was the outside of it, and if you go on the inside, it's remarkably like ours. You see all those little openings for stores, and people could go and they could buy all their favorite things all in the same spot. But in the end, all good things come to an end, and what happened? It got way too big. They couldn't defend it anymore. They got very weak leadership. At one point, 23 of 24 consecutive Roman emperors would be assassinated, so that's not good, and the army got weaker. Then they got hit by plagues and diseases, which you'll watch a different movie about. Then they got invaded all over the place, and you get these different barbarian groups called the Huns and the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths and just the Goths and the Angles and the Saxons, and they just basically ripped the whole thing down. The economy then collapsed after that, and it was all gone. And in fact, when Rome fell, the last Roman emperor was actually so powerless that when this guy by the name of Odoacer conquered the city of Rome itself, it wasn't even worth it for him to kill him. I know it sounds horrible, but still, that's how weak Rome had become. But Rome and Greece have given us a tremendous amount of things. They provided the basis, and Europe had this wonderful run, and they're going to collapse. It's going to be bad. We'll get to it. But make sure you get your comments and questions, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.